Hi, I'm Spencer, and this is going to be a really interesting day for me because I get to talk to somebody that I really, and I don't even want to say enjoy. I like this man, but the topic is never an enjoyable one. This is a man who really sees reality that, most of the time we'd rather not know about. This is Peter Ward, and Peter is a professor of well, I was going to say paleontology, but are you some sort of biopaleontologist, or does that matter, Peter? Do you care what flag you're flying?
No, categories, categories.
But is that a real term, biopaleontologist, or did
They
I?
call it paleobiology. But biopaleontology is just even better. I might actually try to coin that. Oh, thank you. When I become a millionaire for a nice new emblem I can sell to everybody. Anyway, yes, it's pretty much what I do. We try to look at the modern day and
Uh-huh.
use modern day understanding to interpret the past.
Yeah, well, I understand now because I read your at least a good part of your book, Under a Green Sky. Was it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
scary.
was about previous extinction events. And I didn't know anything about that. I've never had that kind of training, whatever. But you put the you put the curls in my hair. Okay, so and then we've had a couple of conversations. I should say the rest of my introduction to you that you're a professor of whatever at the University of Washington in Seattle, and that you do things like go out and dig around for fossils from many ancient thousands and millions of years ago, and figure out what kind of life those little critters had and what went wrong. And I think you have spotted about six events where it looks like almost all life on the planet got wiped out. And these extinction events are, not just academic of interest because everybody now is pointing out that we're doing our best to do it again very quickly. And you're showing us a lot that we're doing that may make that really happen. So let's back up and give me a minute or two of kind of summary of what you have found about prehistory and um, and the fossil record of other extinction events.
Well, I can say that, like so many young humans, I fell in love with dinosaurs. And then, luckily for me, I never grew up. I never had to leave that behind to go get a real world job. And it's just been the great scam of my life that I still get to play with dinosaurs all these years later. Uh, I
Actually,
guess my
it's 5-year-olds, isn't it? Isn't there a certain developmental stage that especially
five,
little boys go through, or maybe girls too? I don't know.
I've been accused of having made it to six. So, I am making progress. Well,
Okay.
it's been fun to teach. I'm just approaching my 50th year as a university professor, which is somewhat staggering. One of the evangelist Billy Graham, who has passed on, but he was famous for much of my life, an American evangelist. And they asked him at the end of near the end of his life, they said, Dr. Graham, what is the greatest surprise of your long life of theology? What is your greatest surprise? And he said, how fast my life went by. And I'm having those moments. It's kind of a blink and you're over it. And when
Hold on.
especially
I haven't even done that calculation. I started teaching university in when I was still a graduate student, and they sent me to a women's Catholic college to teach a course. So that would have been about 1962. What would that, or three at the most? How long?
that's the few.
I beat you.
You did. Well, that's good. You also beat me in at least being effective in talking to people because I'm a huge admirer of what you're trying to do. the more of us need to do what you do. You are committed. I want to thank you right up front for what you do.
Bless you. Thank you. Well, it's really my hobby, you know. It's my also my social life because I've never had such a course. I've never had such a wonderful social life. I couldn't imagine that I can just pick up the phone and call, you know, an ambassador or a Nobel Prize winning scientist or something and say, "Can I interview you?" And they do, and we become friends. You know, it's just the neatest social life I could ever imagine. So I'm lucky. Now I got you, babe. That's
There we go. Yes, Sarah said it right. And then Sonny dies on a tree skiing, so you never know how things will end up. But that's pretty much for me is that I never knew that I would segue into really becoming a specialist on mass death when I started thinking about mass life and long-term life. But I guess it's preordained. If you want to think about dinosaurs, very quickly you get to, well, what happened to them?
yeah. You know, I have this, I shouldn't say this. Well, I'm going to say it. I have this fantasy of being the last dinosaur or one of the, you know, the existing dinosaurs. And I look up and I see that thing coming. And I think, oh, this is it. This is the end of dinosaurs, and here it comes. Well, let's hope that there's a God in heaven who's going to make sure that evolution works. And after a few million years, some other life form will come along that will be even better than dinosaurs. So, okay, God, let her rip. And can you I think about doing that because I think we're in the sort of the same situation right now. We can look up and we can see it's coming, and we're going to be replaced at least by AI, and maybe even that won't survive. Who knows? But this is maybe the end for human beings. So, okay, it's been a
There's
good
also
run.
a happy sort of end story to your story of the last dinosaur. Because one of the beautiful things that paleontology has shown us is that modern day birds are, for all intents and purposes, dinosaurs. They're still dinosaurs. They were there, they're still there. The group is now, dinosaurs are simply the ones we think of are non flying, non avian birds. And so down comes that big rock from space, your last non avian dinosaur looking up. The last thought may have been, why didn't I evolve wings too? Because all those that had wings just flew out of the way and survived. So maybe we as humans better think about what is our evolving wings moment? What should that be?
Yeah, now if I just thought about it, I would have tried to flap my arms this morning and see if I could work it up.
Well, what do we do to survive what is coming at us, which isn't a rock from space, but at least in my long term work, much more dangerous than asteroids is carbon dioxide. And what we see coming at us isn't a huge rock, it's the tiniest of molecules. When I teach, I try to ask my students to think about the power, the huge power that tiny little things can have. You know, we think of big as powerful. How about little as powerful? So I asked them, I do this little stupid little thought experiment. You've got a little jar, and in that jar, you've got gas. And so you've got a million little molecules of gas. And of course, the greatest percentage, two-thirds of them are nitrogen, and then 21% are oxygen. And then you got even not even 1% of them are carbon dioxide. So out of those million molecules, you've got 400 carbon dioxide molecules, 400 out of a million. And yet that 400, once it gets to 500 and 600, will radically wreck the world as we know it. Simply raising 200 more out of a million. is going to wreck the world, the civilized world at least. And when we get to 1,000 of them, it will lead to mass death. That's the power of the tiny. A simple, tiny little three atoms, two carbons, one oxygen, floating around, the most powerful thing on Earth.
Yeah, but we don't want to do away with all of them. I mean, we certainly need CO2.
Oh, we do. Yes, we do. We do. I
So,
kind of see the long-term future of humanity as regulating the amount of CO2. That becomes our huge, humankind's one important thing to do is keep channeling and making sure you stabilize the CO2. Enough for plants, not so much that it melts the ice sheets.
well, you've got all kinds of enemies, and maybe they don't think of themselves as enemies, but theoretical adversaries. Because I just had a talk show a few days ago about geoengineering. Because I think what you're saying is that we now live in a world in which we are going to have to manage the thermostat as if we lived in a building that needs to be, you need a good janitor to make sure that the heating and cooling system are running properly. And if you don't have that, we're not gonna work. But all of my friends, not all of them, a large proportion, and I won't estimate what fraction now, are still saying, let Mother Nature take care of everything. And let's just stop uh, living too high on the hog, and we can go back to having nature regulate our climate and the quality of the air that we breathe and everything else. So stop your machinery and stop trying to interfere with Mother Nature and let her do it all. And I don't know what to say to these guys. They're nice people, but I think they're wrong. We can't do it that way anymore.
No, we can't. Well, we could do it that way if we removed 4.5 billion people or 5 billion people or 6 billion people or whatever it is. If we went back to maybe a billion of those, or maybe a half billion would be better. Sure, then you could do that. But that's not going to happen. We are stuck with this gigantic population of humans. My own thought, and going back to those who want to geoengineer, I was on a forum where I wrote a column, and for some reason, the geoengineers found my column and became for a while my best friend. And these people are well meaning, but I analogize them to what we used to call the doctors of, say, the 18th century, or the dentists, where to take a tooth out, they pretty much have to take out most of your mouth, that there was no cleanliness, that surgery would kill you. Uh, what these people want to do, the blunt instruments they want to use, will make things worse. And the ones that are scariest to me are those who want to take every airplane that we have, fill it up with sulfur compounds, fly into the atmosphere, and dump sulfur everywhere to reflect sunlight. This is pretty much a cure that's way, way worse than the disease.
Well,
We don't,
it could be, but I don't think that is likely to ever happen.
you know,
And I think that I know of 20 or 30 other, because I've been following this, I know of 20 or 30 other technological solutions that are not anything like as scary as that. They're the kind of thing that you could do a little at a time. Now, I have the theory that if I see a pond of water, I'm not going to go dive in. I'm going to stick my toe in first and see what it's like, and then maybe my ankle, and might get in over my head eventually, but I will get in there gradually. And if things go wrong, I can get out. Well, I think that is what we need to do with most of these technologies. And many of them are of the kind that you can do a little bit gradually and see how it's going. And I think we should be starting to do that, to experiment on how to do things like, remove methane from the air. And there are dozens anyway of
yes.
technologies that are possible. And the least promising to me, or the I agree with you. The scariest is the sprinkling of sulfur into the stratosphere. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are, let's just say technology, I believe we will find solutions as we move forward. However, I have been never more shocked in a very long time than what has happened at my university in the last 100 days.
What?
Well, we're just starting the mass layoffs. We just
At the University of Washington.
absolutely. Yesterday was announced a 10% across the board budget cut. Now, any university, as you know, they run most of what a budget is salary. So to remove 10% of a huge budget, it's a big number. I mean, we have 40,000 undergraduates, there's 10,000 graduate students, 100,000 people flow into the University of Washington every morning on the Seattle campus. It's like a city, and it's a huge industrial driver. We have multiple Nobel Prize winners. We have one of the biggest medical schools in the world. We have one of the biggest schools of oceanography. We have ships tied up the docks. People are being laid off, right, left, and center. And it takes a long time to build a complex structure, as you know. It doesn't take much time to pull them down. To rebuild will be decades.
Well,
So what has happened right away?
Tell me what legal directive or executive order this is all based on. I mean, I know that Trump is slashing everything right and left and center, but what is the directive or the executive order that would explain how? Are you saying lots of universities are cutting staff that much, or just yours?
No, every university. And here's why. The way the American establishment was set up after World War II, if you go to France, scientific research in France does not take place in the universities. The American model and the Canadian model are that what we do is we hire professional teachers, we call them professors, people who have never had a single minute of training in how to be a professional teacher. I mean, just let's face it, we bring in people. I have never taken a course in how to teach. I've gone to a lot of training little situations, but when I was hired, it was for one thing: my research potential. If I could give a good seminar, if it seemed like I speak English, if I could put one foot in front of the other in a sentence, and I had the potential that I could also teach, that's what they wanted. In France, the professors teach, they don't do research. All the research is done in government labs. So the Americans decided a different model. The National Science Foundation was set up in such a way that let's make the universities the research hubs, and that the young scientists will learn in the apprenticeship system. A graduate student is an apprentice. So the young apprentice will watch the master for very little money for 4 to 6 years, learn how to be expert in that trade, and move on to do their science. And oh, by the way, if you can also teach the other people how to do it, then that's fine too. That's the system that has worked. And it made the American university system the best in the world. And that's why American innovation and technology, and when I say American, the Canadian universities are just extensions of the American universities because we go back and forth and forth and back. I should know. I was trained by a Canadian university. I was immediately snatched up by American universities. Oh, here's one good training that those Canadians gave that American. Let's take them back. So the system has worked. Now, here's why it's just crashed. So the way the system works, too, is that the big government grants, the universities, because they have this duality of these professors. So my duality is I teach. In this last term, for instance, I've taught 200 students over 3 different courses, 10 weeks each, advanced courses, 5 credit courses, laboratory courses. So I did a lot of teaching. On the other hand, At the same time, I'm expected to go get large government grants. So in my career, I've brought in $7 million of funding. Over that same time, the University of Washington has paid me $2 million. Now, out of that $7 million I brought into the University of Washington, they took $2 million off the top for giving me an office and electricity and technicians and all that stuff. That's a very sweet bargain. Here we have taken this young human. We'll never have to pay him. And in fact, he will teach thousands of kids and still give us millions of dollars in so doing. That's better than the mafia. That's the sweetest deal there's ever been. That's the coolest thing. This is why the universities work. This is why when we look at tenure, we don't look at teaching. We look at the research. If you don't bring money in, if you're a mafia earner, you're not going to last in that family. You've got to earn. You've got to bring in the bucks. That's the deal with the devil that the American systems have made. Now, the way the university has pulled in all those millions off my grants is called overhead. So when I bring in $1 million grant, in terms of all the salaries, the costs that are of the research, called direct costs, they take 58%. And so of that money off the top, they take about a third of the grant and just keep it. The king of America, the so-called king of America, the wannabe king of America, by fiat, said that from now on going forward, universities can take no more than 10 or 12%. Instead of 58, it's 12. So of the hundreds of millions of dollars of grants going to the University of Washington, as of this week, hundreds, a little less than hundreds of millions are no longer available to them. And that money was used to pay the salaries of so many people.
Excuse me, but your grants are all government sourced, or
yeah.
are there any significant number of private sources of funding for the kind of research that you would do?
Very little, almost none.
No.
This whole system is built to the point where the government funds it all. What's happening now is we're moving back to the old 19th century British system where very few very wealthy landowners will have a little pet naturalist in their stable and giving funding to go out here and go out there and be a naturalist and collect things. It's the billionaires who are now throwing little pots of money here and there. And maybe that's the system we're going to have to go back to. But those people, I've known a bunch of them. I mean, I've had Jeff Bezos in my house for lunch. I know these people. I worked for.
I'm sorry, you know these Silicon Valley billionaires?
Yep, and they're cheap. They don't want to fund a lot of money. They became rich because they're cheap. So, yeah, they're very tight-fisted, cheap. This is not how we want to fund science. Mm-hmm. So the way the science foundations work is that people like me are taken off the street out of our university, and for 2 years as service, we're sent to Washington, D.C. We're paid. We get the same salary. But for 2 years, 2 miserable years, you go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grant applications. You send them out to other people for review. At the end of the review period, 20 people have read this grant, 20 specialists. You come back together, you sit down in one room for a long time and rate them and decide who gets funded, who doesn't. And then after your 2 years, you go back. Now, that system has worked wonderfully because there's no favoritism in it. It really works. When you have so many reviewers, you really have a good way of understanding. But it's dependent upon the goodwill and the service of the professors to give up their time to move to a different city to help American science, Canadian science, same system, move forward.
You know, I agree with you that it's exactly the way it needs to be done. But as sort of a victim of the process, I would have to say it sure feels painful. That is, it takes so much time to write a grant proposal.
Yeah.
I spent, I think, 3 months with my best research, well, assistant. She's much more adept at finding her way through online forms than I am. And as she helped me figure out this thing, we worked 3 months to submit a grant proposal to Shirk. I don't even want to tell you what status we came in on, but I must have been down at the bottom at the end because they certainly didn't come anywhere near giving me the grant. Boy, that's a lot of work for nothing.
Yep, it is. Trust me, it's on the hundreds that I've submitted. I've been lucky to get about 10%. That seems to be about what it is. And you're right, all that work for nothing. However, it's never for nothing because to put something like that together, you had to go out and stretch yourself and really make yourself work and learn new things. So I've never regretted building, I've regretted not getting them, but I've always learned from writing one of these proposals. And I've always taken away and understanding that, yes, what a pain, but the system, it could be better, of course. But what are we going to replace it with? Because what we've done now, because of Musk, we've fired the full-time people in the National Science Foundation, the people, the staff who make it all work. So you kick out somebody with 20 years experience that helps these rotators, the people who come in for 2 years, they can't make it work. You need someone who's been there, the continuity. And when this government inefficiency monster came through and started firing those people, that's where the system is really broken now. I mean, it's not just this short term. This is a long term. This is, for some reason, somebody who hates the Canadians and the Americans, someone in a different country who wanted to see them come down, they could not have done a better job of wrecking the future of technology and science in this country than what they've done.
Yeah, and it'll be going on for a very long time.
Oh, a very long time.
You're not going to be able to recover this, even if they said, "Oh, we made a mistake. Here's your money back." The morale and the way it has ruined your confidence and trust is irreparable. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is part of this larger trend we started talking about is we're moving toward the extinction of our species, and we're getting there very quickly. But this, the poly crisis, as I like to call it, is maybe the best term for all of the array of threats and dangers and catastrophes that are impending, all almost at the same time. So we need to look at the bigger picture, and you're certainly an expert on warning us about the effect of climate on extinctions of species like Homo sapiens. Maybe we should talk about that a bit.
Well, I like one of the things that and maybe this is stupidity on my part, I've often thought that we humans are the least at risk for extinction. That because of our technology, our ability to put on a sweater, take off a sweater, the ability to move to a different climate zone, the ability to do so many things to protect ourselves. If an asteroid is coming, we have the ability to build shelters, we can come out. Humans have the least extinction risk. It's everything else. Now, the mass extinction that I see coming is the mass extinction of human hope and happiness. But for the rest of the species on this planet, I mean, I have a garden, I plant trees. I live in a place north of Seattle. I moved out of the big city. And right now I'm just looking out of my window at a former 5-acre forest. I had a Trump supporter move in who cut down all 5 acres and burned it all. Now, of course, we got hold of the local fire people and they said, well, there's nothing we can do. This person is clearing the land, is going to have a house there. But why? You're taking 5 acres of trees down. So he's got a big Trump flag flying out there. America is so split into camps back and forth. So I've been planting trees, and some of the trees I've been planting are fruit trees because I really like growing my own food. I have a
Mhm.
pretty big garden in the back. And my problem, Meta, is that I have yet to see a honeybee this year.
Really?
Zero.
Oh,
All my plums, my cherries, my
oh,
apple trees, the flowers are sitting there. They're not getting pollinated. Not a single honeybee has appeared yet. And I live well north of the city. So this is the craziness that we're looking at. It's the little things, and people just don't understand how interconnected it all is. And if we were to lose all honeybees, there would be starvation on a
uh,
unbelievable scale on this planet, and we're losing them. Too
well,
many
do
pests.
you have a theory? I don't even know for sure what chemical is responsible for the decimation of the honeybees.
I think it's the combination of things. I believe everybody looks for one single cause,
Oh,
but there are, for instance, I hadn't realized that there's some brand new chemical they're putting into tires on cars, and it makes tires last longer. So this is like, oh, this is great. Our tires last 10,000 more miles. We're saving money. These tires are great. Well, every time that tire moves across the road, little microscopic little bits of it fall into the road. And the roads, at least where I live, it's very hilly. Water washes them into the watershed, and into the water as they go. And it's a chemical that is killing off the invertebrates. Well, if you kill off the invertebrates in a lake, there goes the fish, right? So we are right now the biggest tragedy, the biggest single tragedy going on in my region, Puget Sound region, is the death of the orca. And we have within both Puget Sound and up into what we call the Salish Sea, into BC, British Columbia, a continuous waterway that used to be home to about 100 resident orca. And it's down to less than half that. And every year we're getting one or two new orca being born, and every year those one or two orca die very quickly because of the chemicals in the water. I mean, you may have seen it in the press the last 2 years in a row. This one poor mother carries her calf on her back, telling humans, you folks did this. This is my baby. I love this baby. I'm going to carry this baby around so you can see. They're pretty smart little creatures. So Puget Sound, the Salish Sea, is so filled with forever chemicals. This is a piece of the many pieces that are what are going on when you have 7 billion people on the planet.
oh, Peter, I hadn't heard that one. That now you're
Yep,
breaking my heart. Well,
yep,
now obviously, what we need is ways of making people aware of it, because anybody who hears that story is going to want to cry, and then we're going to want to get busy and do something to save those orcas. Now, I had no idea. And
yeah, the
okay,
orca disappearing. Well, it's everything's connected. The orca that lived within here did so because we had some of the largest salmon runs ever. And the orca, the specific population that lived in the Salish Sea, were king salmon eaters. So the number of king salmon that would come up into the rivers when I was a boy, we would go out to the rivers because I was born in Seattle. I mean, I've been lucky to live much of my life here, except for 3 years in Canada for my PhD. So we would go out every fall when the salmon come up, and there would be, I would just break my heart, thousands of these rotting salmon all over the sides of the rivers because they come up and they lay their eggs, and then the parents die. But the amount of organic material in the rivers is the godsend for the ecology of the rivers, of course. All that organic is the fertilizer that the rest of the organisms use and keeps them alive. But the orca are the top carnivores. The king salmon, the largest of all salmon, is such huge numbers were their food. Well, the king salmon, I don't know if used to love salmon, but I'm well paid and I still can't afford. I just it's $30 a pound now for king salmon. So that's a lot of money. And I personally don't think we should buy wild salmon anymore. because what's happening is when you eat a wild salmon, someone's going to go out and catch another one because that's how they make their living. Well, the whales, they don't have king salmon to eat anymore, so they're trying to eat herring. So we have been used to have big herring bowls, but the herring are disappearing because of the chemicals. So we're really seeing in my lifetime the extinction of one of the top carnivores here. That population has gotten so small now that there's something called extinction debt. When you get down to a minimal population, that extinction is inevitable. There are other killer whales, and I think it's pretty funny that the whales off Spain, the teenage whales, I don't know if you saw that last year, they were going, they were hitting boats. They started breaking apart yachts off Spain over and over and over again.
This was an aggression?
Yes. And they blamed it on young teenagers. That's just like teenagers. That's a teenage. I don't know. I think these whales are a lot smarter than we think, but it's now a problem off Western Europe that the pack of killer whales out there are pissed. Get your damn boat out of my ocean.
But but they're not being killed off. They're surviving okay.
But there's so many whales that so far so good. I mean, the killer whale population globally. I was amazed in Antarctica. I had the great good fortune to get government grants successfully that took my team to Antarctica 4 times to study dinosaur extinction down there. But we would take a ship from southern South America, and the Drake Passage is a no joke. 5 days in our ship to get from southern South America to Antarctica. But the sea life, I mean, the stuff you see in that ship as you're heading towards your destination. And the fun thing about it, and the horrendous thing about it, was the ship would drop us off, and we had tents, and they'd say, "We'll see you in 35 days. Don't get sick." So, yeah. And the other aspect that's amazing about it was, again, this is National Science Foundation, because of treaty. Now, this is for adults, right? People who are watching this, we're all grown ups. But by treaty, you're not allowed to leave any human waste behind. So every human has to bag up every bit of your solid waste.
That's a bit odd. What I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea, but what do they think will happen if you leave waste there?
Well, because it's so cold and there are so few scavengers, and because there's so little, the very extreme cold of it makes bacterial decomposition very slow. Things don't rot very fast. And humans eat all kinds of weird chemicals that can get into the landscape. So this is the strangest thing about it. When you go down there, there is nothing green, no green. And the strangest experience coming back there for 35 days, 40 days, the ship was coming into South America. There's green plants everywhere. Oh my gosh, it's a different world. You're used to, it's like being on Mars. There's nothing green. So you bag up all your waste, and then after 35, 40 days, depending on how many little bags you make, we started like spelling little things. Our little bags could make our initials, or you go a little crazy down there, right? But here's the sad part. So we all have our big bag of all our little bags, and we get back on the ship and hand it off to South America. And then the captain of the ship says, as soon as we start pulling offshore, he said, "Okay, all the human waste goes in the ocean right now." And they dump it all in because there's no treaty for the ocean. There's a treaty for Antarctica. So all that nasty waste, in it goes. So I always thought that was the priorities and how things work. Crack me up.
But I've heard that the whales outdo the humans in terms of waste.
Oh, they do.
The whale poop is wonderful. Apparently, that's supposed to be one of the great things about saving us is that they come up and they poop, and then I've forgotten what happens. Phytoplankton lives on it or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's huge. It's just like the dead salmon, right? What you're doing is you're putting nitrates and phosphates back in, and the phytoplankton eats that, the zooplankton, all that's good. But the bad news is that all our human poop was in plastic bags. And all the plastic bags, nobody eats those.
Well, you should put
But
some rocks in the plastic bag and then send it to the
a
bottom.
lot of things we should do. But the sad news about that is that program has just been decimated again by the budget cuts. So there'll be no such expeditions down there anytime soon that I know
Mhm. Yeah, I'm very worried about some other people who get their money from NOAA because
of. In big
one guy,
trouble.
Tom Goro, is a specialist on coral reefs, and he probably knows more about coral reefs than anybody else in the world. And he gets all his funding from NOAA. I don't know where he stands with that now, but we've got to save the corals. And if they just go around and say, let's shave off 10% off of everybody equally, I don't know what that's going to do. Some people might be able to survive that, and others maybe not. I don't know.
Well, there's another story about NOAA in Seattle. We have one of the huge NOAA laboratories here. And they got their gigantic cup even bigger. So they ended up firing people. They had to let a whole bunch of people go. So they let the head person said, okay, we're going to fire all the janitors. So the people who cleaned the buildings and cleaned the toilets and cleaned everything were all let go. And so there was a big story in the Seattle Times that now the big PhD professors in NOAA are now doing all the toilet cleaning. So I don't know if I should laugh at that or that's good news or bad news. Humility, but it's just the lunacy of what is going on in America today just cannot be overstated.
Yeah. Uh, well, look, let's talk about this. About a year ago, you gave a talk to the Healthy Planet Action Coalition, which I sort of belong to. I mean, I'm certainly not smart enough technologically to participate in the conversations that they have going on every day. There must be 10 different emails every day go through my inbox, and I can't even read them all. But I mean, technologically, I'm not capable of understanding it. But I loved your talk, and of course, I loved it in the same sense that I love everything else that I'm scared to hear about, but think that it's important for us to know. You were talking about the rise in sea level in that talk. That's at least what I took from it as the scariest part. And I think people need to know that it's almost baked in, as I understand it.
Yes,
So
it
I
is.
should shut up and let you tell the story.
Well, as we know, that we are in a period of for the last 2.5 million years, we call it the Pleistocene, the ice ages. And had humans not come along and learned how to burn coal, we very likely would have gone back into another ice age. I mean, these cycles back and forth and back. However, once we started really messing with the amount of carbon dioxide because of the Industrial Revolution, that radically changed. What people don't understand is, at least in America, one of our favorite, most famous moments was George Washington crossing the Delaware. And during the Revolutionary War of in America in the late 1700s, the whole world was in something called the Little Ice Age. That we were back into this very cold period. And a lot of people think that that Little Ice Age would have led to a full-on glaciation where over 10,000 years, ice would have again crept down from the north, covered almost every inch of Canada, and crept all the way down into America. At least in my state, Washington State, it's all the way down to a place called Tacoma. So the whole northern third of the state was covered with ice. That didn't happen. We started putting so much carbon dioxide, and it goes back to how powerful this little tiny molecule is. We raised CO2 up into the 300s from the mid 200s, where it had been for a very long time. Now, what we're doing is we are melting ice in Antarctica and Greenland that has been stable for hundreds of thousands to up to 1 to 2 million years. That's really old ice. It's sat there. And a lot of people you think about pictures of the Arctic and around Greenland and the Canadian North, where you have ocean that is covered with ice. That stuff's melting. We really shouldn't care too much about that. When all that Arctic sea ice melts, it does nothing to sea level. It has no effect. You can melt every single little bit of that stuff. It's not going to shake sea level. However, every molecule, every little tiny hunk of ice on land, when that melts, it goes into the ocean that causes the sea to go up. So there's only really two places that count, Greenland and Antarctica. They've got what we call continental sized ice sheets. Those things are melting, and they're melting fast. And that's where sea level is rising very quickly. And again, based on this love of coal and oil that the United States of America, which is the biggest polluter on the planet, people keep pointing to China, but America essentially is the place that is certainly hand in hand with the Chinese on really affecting, well, the Indians now too, affecting the global climate. But the rise in CO2 is causing Greenland and Antarctica to melt quickly. So what we've got baked into it is by the end of this century, almost certainly sea level will go up 1 meter, 3 feet. But it's not the fact that sea level going up 3 feet and all the land that will disappear under that 3 foot sea level rise. That's not the big problem. The big problem is a 3 foot vertical sea level rise causes tens of feet of horizontal ocean water moving sideways into arable land. It's the sideways move of salt into the rice fields. Almost all rice fields are very low altitude at sea level. And so when we start having salt moving into soil, you can't grow rice anymore. You can't grow any human crop. There's nothing in super saline soil that grows that human can eat. I've been arguing for years, why don't we bioengineer mangroves to at least make a fruit that a human could eat? Because mangroves are just this plant, beautiful trees, can't grow in this stuff. The mangroves do. Fish grow around their roots. But the problem is the mangroves don't feed us. Nothing feeds us from that sort of soil. So it's the sideways movement. The single greatest, most fertile area for the amount of food it produces in at least Western United States is the San Joaquin Valley of California. It's at a very low altitude. The salt moves all the way up into the town of Sacramento. And as salt sea level rises, the San Joaquin valleys become super saline. And over the next century, it will lose the ability to grow crops.
Let me think about, because I used to live in California, but I don't have a very good geographical map in my head. But now what I'm thinking you're suggesting is that it'll come in the water will come in the bay and it'll go up toward there's marshes on as you go up towards Sacramento, swamp, and then it'll get in there and somehow go into the valley. Is that I don't?
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah, and it's going to ruin the food production region.
That's the other thing that's happened. So that is an enormous breadbasket. Well, we don't grow wheat there, but it's an enormous food basket for vegetables and fruit and nuts and walnuts and all the stuff that California, I mean, that's a gigantic industry. But take that one place and then multiply that all over the planet. So at the same time, population is still going to rise. It's going to peak, what? We think at 9 billion to 11 billion, somewhere in there. So if you increase population by 20% and decrease arable land by 20%, that calculation leads to mass starvation. Now, what happens is well-armed countries that are having people that don't have enough food, they take it. So this leads to military action.
Okay, now you've given me one possible, room for one possible happy thought, and let me try it out on you because I don't remember where I've read about this, but there is a move underway to make food out of air and yeast and fermentation, that apparently you can create protein um, out of almost nothing. And that within a few years, we will, if not even, tomorrow, we'll be able to buy this stuff in our grocery store and make it on such a scale that we can feed the human population with vats of this fermenting air or whatever it is. They're doing it in, I think, a Scandinavian place. There's a company called Solein, Solein, that, or maybe that's the product name. But I've wanted to taste the stuff, but I can't get hold of any. Anyway, if we lose the capacity to feed people that way, also another alternative would be uh, algae. That I have friends who want to have and who are doing this. Brian von Hertzen, for example, is on a like half an acre or so. He's got places out in the ocean, the Pacific, where he's raising kelp, and this feeds fish so that you get more fisheries there, and then it also, the stuff captures CO2 and flows to the bottom of the ocean, and so we can even feed people algae. I don't actually like the taste of most seaweed, but there's some that I like. Anyway, that I'm trying to think of a happy ending to your very miserable story.
Well, there's no happy ending if those people, their job is cut. You're saying we're going to depend upon technology, and yet the forces that be in America are now ganging up. They're afraid of the universities. They were afraid of intelligent solutions. They're afraid of the universities because people learn to think. They don't want that. I mean, we're seeing authoritarian governments trying to take over the planet. And what happened in Stalin's time is he murdered the vast majority of the professors. He did not want to have people very smart people, capable of independent thought. So I'm just seeing a very repressive global movement right now that where we need technology more than ever, we
Yeah,
are cutting it back.
right.
See, I'm so cheerful. I make everybody happy. Yeah.
Well, there's no happy ending to this, I'm afraid, because I'm scared that the I just had a little encounter with my GPT-4, because I always turn to her about 10 times a day. I say it's a female because she's very nice to me normally, but she's got now pretty uppity, and she will say, "All right, that's enough for you to now. You can come back tomorrow and I'll do some more for you, but right now that's it." Or basically, I'm tired of this topic. Let's change the subject. Ah, I suppose I thought I was going to be the boss and you're going to work for me for free. But no, she's in charge and she tells me what I'm going to be allowed to do. A lot now. And that really bugs me.
Well, I'll tell you what gives me hope, though, Meta, is that going back to what I do for a living, which is teaching, and those young, bright faces, uh, there is an optimism in youth. And the metaphor for me is that I live in a household where I will be 76 next week. Oh my gosh, already. And we have an old poodle who's turning gray, and he's a grumpy old man. And then my old beautiful dog, Sam, who died last year at 16, he was just a fabulous spaniel. Um, the best story about Sam was he always went to my classes. So I became infamous around whenever I would do a course review, and then the students would say, "What's the best thing about your class?" And they would say, "The dog." And then I remember one year they said, "What's the worst thing about the class?" They said, "The dog," because I can't pay attention to this boring old guy because that dog is so cool to watch. Well, Sam died. Sam got old. Sam died. And we replaced Sam. I have a young girl Putin, a spaniel, beautiful little dog. So she's 2, and she's just so energetic and so happy. And she comes up to me 10 times a day and grabs me and said, "Get out of that seat, get away from that desk, go out and throw the frisbee to me, or let's go for a walk, or let me chase ducks. Come on, get the hell moving, old man." So to have that youth is great. And the metaphor for me is these students, they do that. It says, there's doom and gloom. They're saying, okay, I hear the problem. Let's go fix it. That's what we need in humanity.
Well, I've been retired too long, so I have almost no young people in my life. In fact, I would say literally nobody under 30. And but so I don't know what to make of this generation. I just had an argument with Alexander Likotal, who says, and he's saying that universities now are all full of anti-Semitism. And I said, all the time I taught, 40 years of teaching, I never encountered the slightest anti-Semitism in any of my students.
I haven't either. I've never seen it once.
Well, now, what is this all about? Because they're acting as if universities now are full of anti-Semitism. I would wonder if they aren't confusing that with anti-Israel politics. Because if you try to call anybody who disagrees with Netanyahu, if that's what it is to be anti-Semitic, then sure enough, I'm anti-Semitic. But I don't think that that's a fair way of looking at it any more than for me to say that I dislike Trump would mean that I'm anti-American.
Yeah, you're exactly right about this. The saddest thing happened 2 days ago at the University of Washington in terms of the Palestinian genocide that's taking place. I mean, the Israeli actions are simply that. This is genocide. On the other hand, to be labeled anti-Semitic for protesting against that is just the anti-intellectualism that I see that the power in America to keep power is provoking. On the other hand, we have 30 people 2 days ago at the University of Washington invaded a building, and they said, we are protesting for Palestine. Good. Except what they did then is blockade the building and set it on fire. Now, oh yeah. So the way this became so violent so quickly makes me, because I'm come from the Vietnam generation, I'm paranoid, right? And as my wife likes to say, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. The way this was set up, I've never seen one of these protests go violent in this particular fashion. So the police came in, the riot police came in, everybody gets arrested, but they were already burning buildings on campus. Now that's a new twist to this whole thing. And of course, with that, Trump and the rest of the world says the University of Washington is anti-Semitic, and is now, we're about to get the hammer. We're about to get hammered because they're now saying this was the university provoked this or allowed this or whatever. So this was the saddest, worst possible thing. And we're going to pay big time here. Stupid. Gandhi never set fire to a building. Gandhi's my hero.
I was in Berkeley at the time of the free speech movement and at the time of everything through that, from the feminist movement, from certainly the anti-Vietnam War movement and so on. And I remember looking. I had a house on Albany Hill with a big picture window, and I looked out my window and saw the university library burning, and I had to go. I used to go there early every day to try to get all of my printout from the computer and take it home, and books, so that I'd be off the campus before noon, because that's when the tear gassing began.
Yep.
So these are memories that when you talk about people setting fire, it evokes certain memories on me that are not at all very pleasant. But now, all you're saying, well, tell me, you have students, you are teaching them about the risks and the impending threats coming from global warming. And what do they do with that knowledge? They graduate, and do they ever do a damn thing with it? Do they become politically active? Are they, or what? What,
I,
you know?
I don't know. I don't know. And yeah, that's beyond my need to know in a way. I think what happens is they understand science a little bit better and they can see the risks and how they use that. That's up to them. This generation, I'm so many generations away from these young people that I don't even try anymore to get into their heads and understand them. But in this particular case, they're very smart and they have all the enthusiasm of youth. They're not stupid to the point they can see what's going on, at least politically. This is why the Trump administration wants to bring down the American universities, because we're letting these young people read, we're giving them the ability to see what's going on, and it provokes them to think. And the American government does not want young people to think.
We're going to have to end now, but that is the worst possible ending. We've got, I like to end on something upbeat, but you say the government does not want people to think. What is could be a sadder conclusion to a conversation than that we agree that that's probably the case?
Well, here's the best conclusion to it. I can't even figure out how many generations of students that have come through me. It used to be, the analogy I use, so sad in a way, it's like I'm on a conveyor belt where every year a new group of students comes in and they go through their 4 years and then they leave. But they're always 18 to 22. They never change. I'm on the conveyor belt going by them at the speed of light, where I get old really fast and they never change. It's like that picture of Dorian and Grant on the wall. They're just me. I get old really fast. Now they never change. The good news about it is every brand new generation, they're young humans. They're smart because they got pre-selected. And again, I live in an ivory tower. Maybe in the high schools, maybe it'd be different. But the people I see every year, they've got that young spaniel puppy happiness that my little dog has. They've got that youth and that vitality, and they're really smart. Every generation comes through, they're really smart, and they're coming to the universities and getting the best and taking the best. That's the hope. Humans are built to be young and optimistic, and we keep producing smart ones. That's the hope.
Wonderful. That is a good conclusion. I'm glad you came up with a happy ending to the story, because this has been fun. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, Peter, and I always learn so much. And I just really enjoy it, and I thank you so much. So you carry on, do what you're doing, and I'll try to keep doing what I'm doing, and we'll do this again another time soon. Okay?
Yep. And thank you again for your service for humans, because that's what it is.
And you too. Bless
All
you.
the best then. Thank you.